The Pit Press Podcast.
Reinholz launches from downtown. No. Van Horn, no. And that's it. New Mexico wins it.
Kenny Thomas blocks. Gibson hustling down. He has some room. And he gets it. Oh, long three. He got it.
My goodness. Kendall Williams from 35 feet. For the win. Snell. Got it. He got it. Wow. With 1.8 seconds remaining.
Well, first and foremost, the 15,437. Can't tell you thank you enough. We have recruits watching in the building. Our players are going to talk about these type of moments for the rest of their lives. I mean, I had times I'm on the bench where I'm like, don't start crying because it's so special. That's what I truly felt. It's a special, special building. It is the most underrated fan base in college basketball, and we were able to do it on the biggest stage versus a terrific program. So very happy for our guys. They had that moment. We hadn't had a nationally televised game since 2012. We hadn't had a sellout before we got here since 2014. Hopefully we can continue to build off it. And it's great to see the community come together, be a part of it. They're staying after, cheering on our guys. It's what it's all about. So very appreciative. Just an amazing effort all around. We rebounded the ball, plus 10 on the glass. JT Toppin, I know he's going to kick himself for the free throws, but he played his butt off. Jalen House was phenomenal. Mash was in a little bit of a slump. I love seeing his teammates pick him up, and then he hit some big, big shots. And our defensive intensity was terrific. So a great day for our fan base and our team, and we'll enjoy it, and then we'll turn the page tomorrow.
This is going to be their first loss in more than a month.
They've passed well at the rim, haven't they? You can convert them, but
Toppin misses a little bunny. Nice feed from Washington. Toppin gets it back.
I don't know what a little bunny is. Rick will ask you that later. Hey, my name is Ryan Tamori. I'm the host of the Pit Press Podcast here. Very big episode, and we'll get into all of our thoughts on UNM's 88-70 win over number 19 San Diego State in a bit. But as I steal from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, let me introduce the gang that you either like us or you hate us here on the Pit Press. First off, my business partner and co-founder in the Pit Press, Mr. Eric Malton. Senor, how are you doing?
Great, man. Happy to be on. Super encouraged by last night's win, and looking forward to getting all your guys' thoughts on yesterday's performance.
And from the Bay Area, the Bay Don't Play, a two-time offensive state lineman for San Juan Mendoza and the St. Pius Sardines. I just want to let you know, Rick, I never get tired of saying that. His name is Richard Thompson.
You can't just say offensive lineman. Anyone can be an offensive lineman if you let him play. All state, two-time. Anyway, I am fired up, man. I couldn't sleep last night waiting to talk about this. So thanks for having me on. Go Bows.
As always. And you're an MVP of an older person Filipino league in the Bay Area. So congratulations. I love saying that stat as well. And you can follow him at NM Sports Capper on Twitter or X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. Really breaking down yesterday's game. Mr. Jacob Neff, man, how are you?
I'm doing good, Ryan. Ready for the Cowboy game today, but more importantly, ready to talk about the breakdown of yesterday's game. Really excited and encouraged now that they put on that type of performance.
All right, well, I'm going to go first because I get a lot of shit. Here's me on our preview podcast, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. San Diego State to win outright. San Diego State to the plus, obviously plus 3.5 if they're winning outright. They are not scared, and I think things are going to spiral out of control for UNM quickly. Here's my apology to Lobo Nation.
I'm stupid. You're smart. I was wrong. You were right. You're the best. I'm the worst. You're very good looking. I'm not attractive.
All right.
as long as you're willing to admit that.
I love Chubbs. I love that part. You're attractive. I'm not good looking. Man, I'll give my thoughts and then I'll throw it around to some various topics that you guys want to talk about. When it was in the first half, when they were down, 12, I was like, this is over on national TV. The season is kaput. And then all of a sudden they went on a run and never looked back. What they close the first half on, like a 14-2 run or something. It was quite impressive. And I think I had mentioned this as well. This is a crossroads for UNM. And they've got that one hurdle. This week is halfway done, or this next 72 hours is halfway done between getting a win versus San Diego State and then maybe getting Utah State. And Utah State, while they are very good, and I'm not going to delve into that, they have escaped games by the hair of their chin. Like they got lucky at UNLV the other day. I hate saying that. You shouldn't put yourself in the position, but Utah State hit a 3 and then there was a foul. So it turned out to be a 5-point possession with like no time left on the clock. And Utah escaped Thomas and Mack with a win. What I saw, and I'm not trying to flip flop, but with what I saw yesterday, man, I don't, it's going to be hard to beat anybody in the pit. And I had said that they need to go, how many home games do they get in the conference? 9, 10? They need to go 9-0. Eric, I'll start with you, man. You were on the floor. Just your initial thoughts on the game.
My initial thoughts, I felt like that was probably the best well-rounded game the Lobos had played all season, both on the offensive and defensive side. I thought strategically they did a really good job on containing Ladie, and really just containing their entire roster, right? I don't think any single player for San Diego State really stood out. I think the Lobos collectively did a good job at just kind of preventing their open looks. Defensive rotation was on point. And then the emphasis on the rebounding portion. I think the Lobos were +10 in the rebounding column, and really just limiting San Diego State's second chance opportunities. And then on the offensive side, the elephant in the room, which is Jalen House, had a monster game, which kind of overshadowed Jamal Mashburn's big game. There was a stretch there in the second half that Jamal Mashburn looked unstoppable, and San Diego State didn't really have an answer for it. And when you get a healthy dose of House and Mashburn, and then a collective effort of other guys chipping in, don't want to downplay Toppin's big double-double. He's been a monster. And when you have all guys kind of contributing like that, and you have all cylinders clicking at once, this team's going to be an impossible punch-out. So all in all, I thought it was a well-rounded, best complete game that I've seen from the Lobos this season.
They were down 12 in the first half, and UNM went on a 17-0 run late in the first half. That's the largest run against a Division I opponent in the Richard Pitino era, and that gave them a 40 era. Sound like Mayor Quimby. And that gave them a 40-37 lead at half. I mean, it was just like the flip. Not like metaphorically, terrible metaphor, but that was literally like they flipped a switch. And I felt like that arena was like, if you were there and you were on the floor, you were like this close to, I think, all of the air being sucked out of there. Rick, just very quickly, your initial thoughts on the game.
Yeah, I think coming into the game, we knew we had to match their physicality at all positions, and I think that's what we showed. 14 blocks, 14 offensive rebounds. That all comes down to effort. I don't think I've seen a college game with that many block shots. So that means we're just erasing shots where they don't even get a ball on the rim. And I think that just changed the tide of the game. Our defense, when we made that run, it was all fueled by Jalen House with a few turnovers. He made a jumper, a layup, forced a turnover, hit 2 free throws, and then we were just on our run there. So I think it just came down to us matching them and our defensive strategy in the game.
I had to factory reset our mixer that we use for this, and I had stuff saved. So I'll have to re-edit it, but the savage beating comment, because that's pretty much what it was from that point on. Jacob, your initial thoughts of the game?
Well, yeah, the one thing that I was most impressed about is taking the first punch and then being able to retaliate. I know we talked about, on our own version of the breakdown of the game that it was going to be a heavyweight fight, right? You were going to have to be able to take a punch, provide another one. However, it was more of a knockout, right? We took our first punch and we landed the knockout blow. And it seemed like after that, they couldn't respond. I was really impressed with Toppin. He looked like a senior out there. He was unbelievable. I mean, getting 17 points and 16 boards, and the fact that we didn't even really run any offense for him. That was literally manufactured by him, specifically on offensive boards, hustle plays, steals, putbacks under the hoop. That to me right there just shows how much he dominated that game yesterday down low. And then House was amazing, right? We talked about another thing in our preview for the game is, could we keep ourselves emotionally checked into the game, right? And when things are going good, they're going good. No, he didn't allow it to spiral out. In fact, he had Parrish totally off from the get-go. I don't think he flopped on that play. You could see him extend that forearm when he shot that three, but he had Parrish off from the get-go, and then he finally erupted with 2 minutes to go in the game. So the keys to the game, I think we did everything we needed to do, and obviously that's why it factored into being such a big blowout win. Funny thing I've seen online is a lot of people saying, "Oh, the refs were terrible, this, that, and the other." I mean, that's been going on in the Mountain West Conference since the start of play. So you're going to face those things. But, really, really, really impressed in the way that they did that yesterday. I know it was at home, but it was much needed, because if that game would have slipped away from us, like you said, it could have spiraled out of control.
Probably sitting at 1-3 in conference. Then you get Utah State, and you don't know what's going to happen. I hate to be like night and day, but I'll wait for that before we do a Utah State preview, because I think Utah State's a great story. They can't keep surviving like that. They'll turn into last year's Minnesota Vikings. Eric, I'll start with you on this, man. You were, again, on the floor. By the way, the Lobos handed the Aztec their largest margin of defeat in 2 years, since a 75-57 loss at Utah State in 21-22. I appreciate Steve Kirkland at UNM. He's the media contact for the UNM men's basketball team. All this information, I appreciate it. Eric, you were on the floor. Talk about the defensive strategy and how they basically put in check a All-American candidate in Jaden Ledee, not Jason Ledee. I actually called him that the other day, but Jaden Ledee.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and refer to JT Toppin's comments after the game in the post-game presser, because that specific question was brought up, and how they were going to limit Jaden Ledee and how effective he's been down low. He's been their primary scorer, and what they were kind of focusing on was every time that he touched the ball in the post, they were going to crash as many defenders down on him. As soon as he put the ball on the floor, they wanted to start kind of swiping up and making sure that he was not going to be able to get an easy bucket down low, because he was not going to be looking to pass or be a distributor in that type of situation. Every time he touched the ball kind of in and around the key or the paint, he was looking to score. So that was kind of their emphasis, was just kind of crashing down on him and making it as difficult as possible for him to get a decent shot up. And I think they did just that. And as soon as he either had to kick out or he was forcing up a bad shot, he kind of put pressure on some of the other guys who aren't necessarily used to having to create a shot and score for San Diego State. So I think that was the emphasis. But I think Rick had made a couple points in just kind of our group text message on the defensive strategy. So I'm going to refer to him to kind of answer the second part of that question.
Rick, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so what Eric is hitting on is true. Ledee didn't get many touches on the block. It was mostly catching it at the elbow, and that's because we were making it tough for him. So I think in the first few possessions, he got some easy Euro steps into the lane, it looked like. But after that, most of his shots came from mid-range. He was 6 for 15 from the field, only got to the line for 3 attempts, did make all of them. He did have 4 assists, which is above his season average, but I think what Eric's hitting on is that pressure hurt him. He also had 4 turnovers, and that turned into fuel for us, I think. So just the difference of different bodies coming at him, and then just Toppin and Nelly each had 5 blocks, right? So I think it was a whole team effort focused on Ledee. Toppin, in that interview, they asked him if he was impressed with Ledee, and he kind of had a sarcastic answer
Yeah.
of, yeah, he's pretty good. So it just shows you, I think, how good Toppin is, and Toppin doesn't even understand how good himself is, right? He played just as good or better than Ledee yesterday, and I think he's realizing that, and that's why he was kind of laughing during his answer, because he realized he just outplayed that guy. So it was a total team defensive effort, House with the steals, but I was just impressed on their coverage of Ledee. They made him look like a pedestrian yesterday.
I want to add one comment to that too, and I don't think if you guys ever caught this, but because they were making it so hard on Ledee and kind of just on the perimeter defense on crashing down and limiting his touches and really just kind of denying the ball down in the post, San Diego State had to make an adjustment. And at one point in the game in the second half, Dutcher made the call to get Ledee the ball in the backcourt and let him bring the ball up the floor. And he took, I don't know if it was Nelly or took Toppin one-on-one and had to shoot kind of like not necessarily a shot that you would see kind of a 4 or 5 generate off of his own dribble. He did end up making the shot because he's a skilled big. But when San Diego State kind of had to change their offensive approach to get Ledee the ball, let him bring the ball up in the half court, that's when I think that you could definitely tell that the Lobos defense was kind of imposing their will at that point.
And I mean, if you look at it, all the other starters for San Diego State were all under in single digits, right? Their only other 2 guys that scored in double digits were Trammell and Bird off the bench. So that just shows you the whole team was covering and getting out on the shooters, in my eyes.
And Bird hit 2 threes very, very late in the game when it was pretty much over to get to 13. So that's pretty impressive. I was sitting next to a former manager at the game, and under Alfred and I think Neil, and he was like, "It's such trash that they're allowing those shots because you never know when that could happen." And I was like, at this point, I think at that point they're just trying to get out of there, end the game. I think that's garbage time. There's nothing to worry about there. And as far as the JT Toppin reaction in the post game, I'm glad you brought that up, Rick, because he was just like, like he's very, he's young. I don't think he wants to talk to the media, and he's done that a few times when they've brought him out to talk, but they have to. I mean, the kid's stellar. He's a very good player. And again, all the national guys yesterday were talking about Phil the 68, Dick Vitale. I mean, it was pretty cool, but yeah, he kind of gave his answer like a South Park character. And I think it was Jeff Grammer who asked him that, and he was like, he's all right. Like, he's pretty good or something.
I think that's just kind of reflective of their mentality, right? Like, no one is better
What do you
than
mean
me.
by
No
that?
one is better than us. That's what I said. Like, no one is better than us, and that's kind of like the approach they were taking. And like, I was up at the top of the ramp before the team walked down to kind of the pregame entrance right before tip, and some of the guys that I kind of saw in the middle of the huddle, that House was in there, Mashburn was in there, even True Washington was in there, and they were being pretty vocal. Both teams were kind of talking shit to each other, not to a point that they were going to reach some like physical altercation, but you could just see the stare downs and that dog mentality, for, I guess, lack of better terminology. But I think the mentality of the team when they were walking down that ramp, they were amped up for this game. They weren't going to come in and let a team out physical them because they understood the stakes and just the overall mentality of the team. I think they just kind of portrayed that, and that was pretty reflective of what Toppin had said at the post-game presser.
Jacob, I'll go to you. This team got solid minutes out of its bench players, Emzil, True Washington, and Sebastian Forsling. I think when even Sebastian Forsling is scoring a bucket, and again, I love his dad on Twitter. It's no disrespect. He comes off the bench. He hasn't seen many minutes. But when he comes off the bench and is scoring in a game like this, that's huge. And then the other guy that we have ripped to shreds on this podcast has actually played pretty well. And when things were dire there in the first half, who got it going was Mustafa Amzil, the transfer from Dayton. He played almost 19 minutes, 3 of 4, 2 of 3 or 4 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3. He hit those 2 big threes, and I thought, oh, like that's when they got it going. And I thought, oh, okay, here we go. He made 4 or 5 free throws, and he scored 12 points. I thought that was impressive. I watched the game last night. Mississippi State, the playoffs on, the NFL playoffs on, Mississippi State and Alabama, and we talk about how bad UNM's free throw shooting. Mississippi State went like 17 of 26 from the line and lost by 6 in an SEC game. Just let that sink in. But overall, Jacob, that's why I wore the hat yesterday. Make your free throws. I don't have it on now. Jacob, just your overall thoughts on the guys coming off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, that was huge, right? I mean, I think what we're starting to see Amzil turn the corner. And, it took 15 games, 14 games for it to happen, but at least he's settling in. You can see he's starting to contribute. You can see he has a little bit of confidence back, right? And more importantly, we need that 10-point production off the bench. We just have to have it. You can't rely on Mashburn, House, Dent, or Toppin, whoever's going to do it, to continue to put up 20 to, or 16 to 20 points a game. You've got to have that contribution off the bench. What I liked yesterday is he was getting to the line. I know that, a couple of them were off technicals, but if you look at his stroke from the line, he can shoot free throws. And I don't think we even have noticed that because he's never gotten to the line, but he actually kind of shoots off to the right-hand side, like a Wilt Chamberlain, or, it's really interesting, but he makes his free throws, and, the confidence is coming. You could tell he was even getting in with like a little bit of squirmish, and, he had a little bit of swagger himself. I could see it yesterday. His confidence level's back, which is great. True only had 4 points, but he was way more effective than what his stat line showed. I think he was involved in the offense. He had things moving. He played good defense. He was up there supporting on a lot of the defensive ends. And I was impressed with him yesterday, even though it was only 4 points. And then, thank God that they put in Sebastian Forsling. And I'm just saying that from the sense of we need size. And when we take out Nelly or Toppin, you have to have somebody down there that's bigger than Amzil. You just have to. And you saw yesterday, it was only a 4-minute stretch where they put him in, but he had a layup. He altered one of Ladie's shots, and he was at least physical down there, and he didn't foul. That was the important thing. He didn't foul. He didn't look too slow. So even if we could just get like that 4 to 6 to 7 minutes out of him every game, that's going to be huge, because you're going to be able to rest your big guys, keep them fresh for a little bit, get them that little second half win that they need. And I was impressed by him. I thought he did what he needed to do for that 4-minute stretch. And then we talk about free throws. 21 of 31 doesn't look great. Let's also remember Toppin was 1 for 10 from the stripe yesterday. 1 for 10. That's got to improve from his perspective, because that guy could have thrown up 25 yesterday but you could tell he had totally lost it. He had no idea where his stroke was from the line. But if we take away Toppin's his stats from yesterday, we're 20 for 21 from the free throw line. So we did what we had to do. You got to make your free throws. We did. The Aztecs 11 for 20. They didn't make their free throws. And quite frankly, they were all over the place. It was never consistent. They were going 1 of 2 or 0 for 2 in a lot of possessions. And like we said, you can't have 0-point possessions in a game like that, especially when they're on the road. So free throw shooting was super important. I think the bench play was what we've been waiting for. I don't want to make this take, but I think it's time to say it. I don't think Jamal Baker's the X factor. I don't think he's going to be a contributor on this team, it's very apparent. He's either lost, out of place, not getting stuff ran for him, but he's a total non-factor on the floor anymore. And so I think what is crazy is we thought that this guy could be somebody that would really help us out. I think that role is now completely in the sole possession of Amzil in the second line. And if I don't know how they do it, but if they keep playing the way they are on the second line and not getting him any shots and him just being completely stagnant on the offensive end, I just don't see where he's going to find a spark in the next, 10 to 13 games where he's going to make that contribution that we were looking for him to have. So I think we're going to have to start focusing on Amzil's production and kind of put him in a back seat because I just don't see it.
Yeah, I'm somebody who was really high on Jamal Baker Jr. just because of that veteran leadership. I'm wrong about that as well. Goes to show what I know. Jacob, you had mentioned one thing, and you had said, I don't know if you said it on our show or off the show, but you said that if San Diego State gets down, they're not a 3-point shooting team. They got down, they couldn't rally other than those Miles Bird, I was going to call him Marlon Bird, Miles Bird threes at the end. I mean, that cut it to like 16 or 18. You were spot on with that. Can you just laugh,
Yeah.
Your reaction on that?
Yeah. I mean, they're not a 3-point shooting team. And we did what we said we were going to do, right? Frustrate Ledee, make other players take shots, and, guards' natural habits are going to be shooting outside shots, even if they're not good at it, and the Lobos baited them into shooting some threes or even taking terrible shots at the end of shot clocks because they just had nothing there for them. Now, if you look at the stats, the Lobos were 7 for 24 and the Aztecs were 7 for 22. So we technically didn't shoot better, like we said on the preview show, but 7 threes made by the Lobos is better than 2 or 3. That's a 15-point difference in the game yesterday just because 5 more went in. You still have to take them. It's the equalizer in college basketball. You have to figure out a way to get them in the game, even if your percentage is lacking, because ultimately you're going to need those points. And I think that they took a couple of bad threes, but I mean, for the most part, the threes that they took were open and you have to take them. And yes, the Aztecs made 7 threes, but we talked about Bird making a couple at the very end. So they really shot 5 for 20 before that. So we technically would have had the advantage in the 3-point area, but they had kind of got a little lackadaisical on offense and we're just trying to get the game over with. So, that's the big part of it, get the threes up, give your chance to make, we shot, I think, 11 or 13 more threes if you compare them to the last 2 games yesterday than we did in the the Wyoming and the UNLV game. So you gave yourself more opportunity, and look what happens. You've got to do it. And I was encouraged by it because, as those go in, you're going to gain more confidence. So you got to keep chucking them up.
Eric, you were on the floor, as I've mentioned. That run in the last 5 minutes, and it was fueled by UNM forcing turnovers, and San Diego State was taking bad shots. I mean, what did you see?
Oh, exactly what Neff was just kind of talking about, right? Forcing San Diego State into some bad shots. One of the matchups that I was kind of paying more closely attention to was Darion Trammell and Jalen House. If you
They
guys
went after
recall,
each other.
Yeah, well, if you recall last year, Darion Trammell was the one that kind of kept San Diego State in the game and knocked down some daggers last year that kind of sealed the game for San Diego State. And a lot of them were 3-point shots. He had 5 3-point attempts yesterday. I think he only made one of them, if I have that right, or maybe he went 0 for 5. He was 1 for 5 from 3-point line. But paying closer attention
He had that nice circus. I
Yeah.
don't mean to interrupt. He had that nice circus shot in the first half where he kind of like shot over the backboard and he was kind of like, I didn't get fouled. That was a pretty nifty shot. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was, and he definitely kind of has that as part of his repertoire, but nonetheless, that shot was contested, and Darian Trammell was contested all game long, and House was just all over him like the pest. I think that's the nickname that Rick had kind of come up with him, but you could just see the on
Fantastic
ball,
movie.
yeah, on ball pressure, forcing them into weird situations. The threes and the shots that San Diego State did hit were open looks. Everything else was contested. So I think I partially agree with what Neff was saying, is San Diego State just not really an effective 3-point shooting team. But I thought a lot of that was impacted by the Lobos on ball pressure and just overall defensive schematics, right? And just kind of forcing them into some unfamiliar situations that they're not used to shooting in. So House, that's what kind of he brings to this team, is that overall defensive energy, forcing them into Darren Trammell looked uncomfortable out there at times. He was dribbling the ball off his foot. I think he got his pocket picked once, which kind of sparked that first half run where House got a layup out of it and then hit a three almost immediately after that, which forced Dutcher into calling a timeout, and that kind of set the house on fire, right? So I think it all starts with the kind of that on ball pressure, and that all comes directly from House. And I think he kind of won that one-on-one matchup.
Yeah,
Rick,
I just want to comment. I just wanted to comment one. Yesterday, San Diego State shot below their 3-point shooting average at 7 for 22. And I think that if we look at the way that game played out, that just goes to show you, with the way that they forced them and frustrated them early, they had no option but to shoot threes to get back into the game, right? And they just can't do it. I mean, I get what you're saying, Eric, but if you go look at that team, they only shot 1% lower yesterday than what their season average is. If you get them into that point where they're down in a game, it's going to kind of be like the Lobos, right? Where we struggle to shoot threes. They can't do it. And especially when Ladia is not getting easy baskets. I mean, I think that the game plan yesterday just unraveled exactly how they wanted it to, right? Not exactly how it wanted to in the first half. I don't think they wanted to get down by 12 points, but I think that they knew if they just sustained and got them to have to shoot 3-pointers, which is what we talked about, and, bait them into them, that eventually they would, they'd get enough empty possessions to where we could take advantage of that. And I think that that's what played out.
I just wanted to say this real quick. I was thinking about San Diego State's schedule. They're at Nevada on Wednesday night. Or excuse me, they host Nevada on Wednesday night. They're at Boise, and then it's kind of easy. Then they get Colorado State, Utah State. I don't know how good they're going to be on the road. I mean, I know they went to Gonzaga and beat them. Then Santa Clara finally beat Gonzaga. Then I think got waxed by St. Mary's last night. But Rick, I'm going to go to you on this and talking about Jalen House, because we always joke about like WWF and ECW and stuff like that. But Jalen House said his favorite wrestler was Randy Orton, and I need to queue up some Macho Man Randy Savage sound bites. Cream of the crop here.
Again from deep. Good rebound too. Look at Toppin keeping it alive. House from deep. Get it. This kid is amazing.
Also, very cool to see Bill Rafferty there. I didn't mention that. That was awesome. He's the man. And he's like 80. It's awesome. He sounds like a spry guy. Rick, just your thoughts on Jalen House and his energy that kind of changed the game, and how he's just John Leguizamo as the pest on the floor defensively.
Yeah, as we know and we've seen for the past couple seasons, he's the heartbeat of this team. He obviously fueled that turnaround there where he starts pumping up the crowd, and 2 seconds later he gets a steal, and the crowd just exploded. So 26 points. I think he had 5 or 6 rebounds, 5 or 6 assists. He's really driving this team right now. And I just found out from Mashburn in his last media thing that House is a new father. Maybe that will help him calm down his emotion or keep it in check a little bit, because we all know that matures you pretty quickly when you have a child. So, I can't say enough about his game yesterday. His emotional intelligence, I think, is rising. And Coach Patino said, he doesn't want him to change the way he plays, and I don't think we can afford it. He was the only guy, I think, outside of Amsel that knocked down double-digit threes yesterday. So I think outside of him, though, we need some other guys to hit threes. I'm still looking at my man here, Double D, Donovan Dent, had a second bad game in a row. From an overall perspective, Dent still had rebounds and was contributing on the defensive end. But I think once we get House and Dent and Mashburn to all go, we can even hit a higher level than we hit in this game, because we're still not firing on all cylinders in my eyes. But House is just going to be our leader moving forward. And he had a great interview with Rafferty after the game. I just think he represents New Mexico great.
Donovan Dent, 1 of 8, 0 for 3 from the 3, but he did go 4 for 4 from the free throw line. I didn't mean to take your thunder away from House. Go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
I guess one other thing on Dent, I guess the threes that he had looked open to me, and I think he needs to continue shooting them, even though he's not making them, because they were good looks. And earlier in the season, he was making his mid-range shot, it seemed like, a lot more, whereas the past few games he's struggled with that. So I'd like to see him continue to shoot, along with House leading the charge now. I don't want to see Dent disappear.
Eric, I'm going to go to you on this. Mash, and I think this is what you had kind of mentioned, Mash, late game takeover. The Aztecs didn't have an answer. Jamal Mashburn's line, and I say this all the time. I don't like to be stats guy, but in context, 7 of 17, 1 of 6 from 3, 4 for 4 from the free throw line. He had 19 points. He had 2 assists. That's the Jamal Mashburn we know and love, right, Eric?
That is, yeah, and it shouldn't be overlooked. And I know we've kind of, me being one of them, kind of criticized him a lot on just his style of play and kind of fitting within the offensive scheme and being able to uh, contribute for others, not only just create his own shot. But yesterday, what we saw from him, and really just kind of from like a whole offensive picture, I thought Patino did a really good job of kind of blending in Mashburn and House and Dent. I think Neff called out kind of mid game there, because we were all just kind of talking that whenever the Lobos did make that long run in the first half to kind of gain back the lead after being down 12, Mashburn wasn't on the floor for a lot of that. And so, like, it just kind of plays into the point. Well, we don't necessarily need House to or Mashburn to be this leading driving force on the offensive side, but if he can somehow kind of fit himself into the offense and create mismatches, which he did in the second half when the Lobos started to pull away, it makes this Lobos team really hard to defend. Because I think when in the second half, when the Lobos did start to pull away, you could kind of see San Diego State kind of tighten the bolts a little bit to try to get some stops to get back into the game. And then once we gave the ball to Mashburn and started to kind of run some ball screens for him, get the ball in his hands, let him start making decisions, he caught fire. And at that point, he just made it impossible to catch the Lobos down that last stretch. And that's kind of what Mashburn does. And that's kind of how his game can be plugged into this system. And I'm not necessarily saying that he thrives or flourishes when the Lobos have a lead, but whenever they need to get a bucket and they're playing a team that has a really good defense, chemistry wise, and kind of stopping everything as a whole, Mashburn is that guy who has the capability to create his own shot. And when he caught fire and he starts seeing some shots go down, Mashburn becomes one of the best guards in the country at doing stuff like that. So I think there's definitely still a place for his role on this team. I don't want to completely kind of remove that from the whole equation, but I think Patino did a pretty good job of kind of getting him kind of acclimated and working in the rotation, because there were points in the game where it was Dent and House, or it was True and House, True and Dent, and then Baker didn't see a whole lot of minutes last night, but then Mashburn came in, saw his minutes, and all 3 guards weren't on the floor at the same time. So I think it's trying to find a healthy balance of who's on the floor at the same time and the overall chemistry. And once they kind of find that sweet spot, then I think this team becomes really dangerous, because at the guard position, they don't really skip a beat. And I think John Rothstein kind of put a tweet out there post game, was like, this Lobo team has a plethora of guards, and it's extremely dangerous. And I think he compared them to one of the Rhode Island teams back in 2017 and 2018 when they made the NCAA tournament. And I think they won that first game, if I'm stand corrected. But I think it's a good problem to have. And when you get a good house and a good Mashburn, I think you can afford to have mismarked games by Dent and some of the other guards. So it's just about finding other ways to contribute. So Dent might have had a bad game statistically wise, or we didn't see kind of have a traditional Dent game, but he did have 6 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds. That's a pretty solid stat line considering he was a point guard, kind of more on the defensive side. He just didn't shoot very well. He was 1 for 8 from the field.
I add something real quick, Ryan. With that, you know, just because I tweeted that out, I told it in our text message, but I want to give Patino credit for what he did yesterday in that situation, because that's something that I haven't seen him do all year. Mashburn was we use this term a lot. He was spiraling out of control yesterday, and it was bad for like a 3-minute stretch. He went down the floor, he turned it over. He didn't hustle back on defense. His guy made a layup. He then got the ball on the inbound, turned it over again, and then came back down the court and left his guy wide open for 3. So essentially he gave up 2 offensive possessions with no points, and then gave up 5 points on the defensive end. And he took him out because you could tell. I mean, if you just watched him, I know it's hard for your guys' perspective being at the game, but on TV, he was just like lackadaisical on the defensive end. We had been playing, you know, really good defense for the first half, doing a lot of pressure, and he was just kind of moping around on the defensive end. And that goes to kind of what Tron was saying when we did our collaboration, is he's not there on the defensive end, right? Patino got him out of the game, and then we went on a 9-0 run, which extended into a 17-2 run, and then he kind of reset him, and Mashburn was able to, you know, reel himself back in, come out in the second half, and have an effective second half, right? So good on Patino for, you know, putting those guys in check, holding them accountable for their actions. You know what I mean? They're star players, but if you're not going to play like one, you need to get a reset every once in a while. And I think that was probably the key portion of the game, if you think about it. I mean, 17-2 run really sparked that team, and you know, good on Patino for making a good coaching move there and getting the guy out of the game that was having a rough time, and, you know, finding something that worked, which was bringing in True and running a good offense and having consistent pressure defense. I almost even thought they should start the second half with True coming in and leaving Mashburn on the bench, and then subbing him in for True if that didn't work at a halftime, because it was that effective at the end of the first half.
They lost to Stanford, but I'll be damned, I didn't remember that. Something that we didn't talk about was UNM was plus 10 rebounds, and they did a good job team rebounding, or that approach. And obviously, if you're rebounding, you're probably limiting second chance points. UNM had 47 rebounds, and San Diego State had 37. I think of Jay Billis last year, and he was like, if you know nothing about college basketball and you're going to pick tournament teams, this is why Jacob and I we finished first and second in our pool last year between the two of us. I went with Gonzaga and you went with UConn, and I was like, man, that was the smartest choice to pick the title. But we finished first and second, and I don't know what your strategy was. You're much more in tune. I love the history. I always mention that. I love the history of stuff. But I just, and looking at it, he said that, but we had watched a lot of, we watched a lot of college basketball. Obviously that helps. But I was looking at stats, and I just kind of picked teams that were the better rebounding team. And I rolled with the SEC. And we bet a lot, and we usually are pretty much betting the same thing. And it's like the only time I've ever gone against you. I picked San Diego State to cover, and they they didn't. But I wish Ed was on this podcast. But Rick, I'm going to ask you about this because you were a post player in high school. And it's cliche, and I know I'm being like the stupid sportscaster here, but when you out rebound somebody by 10, and when you out rebound somebody like this San Diego State team, I'm impressed, and that's pretty damn good. I don't know your thoughts on the rebounding.
Sure. Those of you listening might say, what does this 6-foot white guy know about rebounding? Well, unfortunately, I know a lot because I was forced to play down low. I've even guarded Hunter Green at River Point in the post and got demolished. I've got slammed on. I've got my shot pinned against the glass like San Diego State was experiencing last night. So I know about dealing punishment and receiving punishment down low. Um, when you look at the stats, 14 offensive boards, I think a lot of that is because we're forcing them into the quick shots that Eric and Jacob were alluding to. And a lot of times, forcing a bad shot is just as effective as a turnover, right? When we were speeding them up, they took these uncharacteristic shots, but then it comes back on the defensive team to get the rebound and push the ball up the court. So I think what our bigs do really well is obviously get the rebound, but then they're both pretty good outlet passers in my eyes and don't create a lot of turnovers themselves after getting the defensive board. So it all comes down to attitude and effort, and I think that's something we're going to have to put in our suitcase when we go on the road, right? Our shots might not always be following, but rebounding effort should always be there. And I think, when we have our guards also crashing the boards with House and Dent getting a few boards each, it's a team effort. It can't rely on the bigs because, Amzil isn't the best rebounder. Once we start to get some bench players in, so everybody has to do their job. And I think Forsling, I don't think he's going to be a huge force moving forward, but I think if we can get him in there for 4 or 5 minutes a game, to obviously rebound, but also to just get his body and challenge shots like he did, and then roll hard to the hoop. If he can just get 4 or 5 hard play minutes, I think that helps us and allows our big guys to get a break also. So just super impressed with rebounding effort, and just hope they can take that with them after we finish this little home stint here.
Eric and I were at the game. It was an announced crowd of 15,437 at the pit. It was the largest at the arena since 2009, and that was the season before the renovations were made. Of course, that was the 2009-2010 Alfred team that went 30-5, and as Ed always says, those don't grow on trees. The 18-point margin of victory was the Lobos' largest against a ranked opponent since they shellacked, and I remember that. I was in New York at the time. 85-50, New Jersey, 85-58 win over number 6 Nevada with Eric Musselman, and then the Martin brothers or twins. Toppin 16 rebounds were one shy of Kenny Thomas's freshman school record of 17 rebounds he set against number 10 Utah in the 1996 WAC championship. Toppin's 9 offensive rebounds ties Thomas's freshman record from the game. The Lobos handed the Aztecs their largest margin of defeat in 2 years since a 75-57 loss at Utah State in 2021-2022. I didn't really give my thoughts because I don't break down the X's and O's. It was a total team effort. And again, it's like the NFL, like it's week to week. Like what do you expect? I was really worried, and you can't say, hey, like the first half when they were down 12, it was like, the Temptations, like same old song. And they flipped that switch and they crawled back in that game. And it for the latter part of the second half, man, it was a dogfight. And they got into it with each other. And another thing I want to say is try not to call out people on Twitter because, dear Lord, I mean, there's better things to do in life. And as I mentioned this, yes, we do have a Lobo in our logo, or a wolf in our logo. We try to remain objective as we possibly can on this podcast, and we were getting flack for, well, why would you post that picture of House in Parrish's face? It was a good picture. That's what we did.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. Looks like we had a little bit of technical difficulties there, and we had Ryan fall off there for a minute, but we're just going to wrap up this episode before we kind of finish it off. But before we get off, I'm going to start with Jacob, just because your beautiful face is on the screen. But let's wrap it up with your snake of the week.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to discredit any of the players' stat lines and contributions yesterday, but my snake of the week is Patino and his coaching job. I was really impressed with some of the decisions he made in the game yesterday. Like I said, taking Mash out when it wasn't working. And then ultimately we talked about and we drilled down into what second half adjustments are going to be made and how they're going to look coming out of half. And yesterday they looked good out of half, and then throughout the second half increased that lead and put the game away pretty much, with about 6 to 7 minutes left in the second half. So I wanted to give credit when credit's due, and I think Patino had a good game coaching yesterday. So that would be my snake of the week.
And Rick, your snake of the week.
My snake of the week is just overall Lobo country. I think we got the whole Lobo Nation fired up for the rest of the season now. Yesterday on Kenny Thomas's post-game show, we had Clayton Shields calling in, Royce Olney, former great, calling in. So the older Lobos are ears up now. I think everybody is tuned into this team, and we just need to continue to support them moving forward. So just a shout out to all the fans showing up, and to all our followers.
All right, and I'll wrap up my thoughts. I think my snake of the week has to go to Mr. Toppin, just with his dominant performance, right? 17 points, 16 rebounds, and kind of going head to head with one of the premier bigs in the entire country, not just the Mountain West, and Jaden Ledee totally outplayed him from an offensive and a defensive standpoint. I think his overall presence on the floor and just causing ruckus on the defensive side, being able to pull some rebounds down. I can't go understated how important Toppin is to this team and them moving forward. So that would be our snake of the week. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up. We'll go ahead and kick off a preview of the Utah State game. I think we're looking to release that probably Monday evening, if not Tuesday morning. And for those of you that don't know, Utah State does come into the pit on a 15-game winning streak, which leads the country. So I'm not going to be the one to say it, but how does the saying go? It would be a shame if someone were to mess that up for them. And there's no better place like the pit to go ahead and do that. So signing off, this is the Pit Press Podcast. Thank you guys for listening.